All right, part 2 here. So, a little bit more than halfway through this book, you have the Peake Martin's Index of Faerie. It says, as presented by Professor Peake Martin in 3 lectures at the Royal Academy of Sciences, June 1877. So, I like this part of the book. This is like the bestiary, but for fairies in the Fae. It comes off almost real worldy, so I kind of did a look for it on Amazon to see if there was a book, called Peake Martin's Index of Faerie, and there wasn't. But there's another book. There's a fairy book on there, which is pretty cool, and it's a big book, and they talk about all sorts of different fairies. I'll see if I can find it, put the link on there, because I think it'd be an even cooler, in-depth bestiary, or more explanation about fairies and more inspiration for this kind of a game. And they go to all sorts of different fairies. And you think fairies, you just think, oh, the winged small creatures, mischievous and all that. But it's more like they take on humanoid, full, straight-up humanoid. It's a little bit more than that. And it's not so much, it's similar to D&D, like you have a bugbear in here. But it's not a bugbear like you think it is necessarily in D&D. It says, a troublesome fairy who terrorizes households, uses divination. It can conceal, curse, and transform. So a bugbear is a common bogey, and it comes in a host of shapes and sizes, made all the more confusing by its penchant to transform its own shape. Whatever form it assumes, the bugbear is trouble, for it only causes mischief and grief. It will use glamours to harm to the household and will even attempt to carry off children and the helpless. And it goes on a bit more. But a bogey is more of definitely an evil kind of fairy. And it's shape-shifting. That's one of the villains that Stanley took on when he was getting his Christmas tree. It shifted in front of them, and and they have all their stats. Like I said, there's a range that you can either choose or roll in between to see how strong they are. A fireball. I mean, the only thing that kind of stinks, they don't have a lot of pictures, no illustrations here. So they could have used a few here and a few there. You didn't have to do it with every one of them, but I think that would have helped. An imp, an ogre, an English spirit in parentheses, member of a race of terrible man-eating savages, known skills as wrestling. So don't think of it just fairies. This is all sorts of fairy adjacent, but not quite D&D. A little bit, I dare say, a little bit deadlier. You got your standard will-o-wisp, and it tells you what countries are more common in, like England, Scotland, and what they're called in those countries. And called a bogey in Scotland, will-o-wisp. Also in England, they're called a hinky punk, or a spunky, or a Taran. It goes into the Seelie court a bit more. Because they're associated with the Fae and all that. And then we get to the real guts. I think the real gusto of this book that I like because it gives you a good summary. And that is called the Crompton's Illustrated Tour Book of Great Britain. Being a text on our fair country, her peoples, her fairies, and her ways. Part the first, England. Now, I would even recommend, if you're going to, play this, an adventure or two in this system, in this world, watch Rick Steves on YouTube, his tour of Britain, pretty much, and the different parts of England and Scotland and all on there. It's beautiful. First of all, it's great and it's informative. It's beautiful to watch. But second, it really gives you visual cues, if you're not from England or you've never been there, of the landscape and the aesthetics and the feel of this that this would give you. I mean, your imagination is great. and that you should mostly be using that, but because this isn't perfectly historically accurate, it's like a parallel world of England, so you can kind of do your own thing a bit more too. So yeah, it goes into a little bit about the different areas in England, and see the West Country, Wessex, and all the villages and hamlets and all that in there. The Southeast, Kent, Surrey, Sussex. So this is good generally. Just know these different towns and cities in the country. English shires, Derby. I think that's where Stanley is living, in that area there. Lincoln, Leicester. I'm sure I'm saying that wrong. Nottingham. Okay. Northampton, the heart of England, Berkshire, or Berkshire, however you want to say it. Oxford, however the correct pronunciation is. Colleges come into play, definitely, especially maybe with magic a little bit, but in the sciences as well. So that's good. It gives you, this is kind of like places of interest. And this is good for the solo player too. You can kind of say, okay, I want this to take place in this area, so I check that off on my list, and I'm going to run into this landmark, and yeah, points of interest. It's great. It says here, points of interest: Wayland Smithy, Berkshire, in the legendary barrow near the White Horse of Uffington, is said to ring the hammer of Wayland. Yeah, I love that. It is believed that anyone needing a horse shod need only appear at the nearest crossroads with a bit of money and leave both mount and coin for a brief time. Upon the travelers returning, money will be gone and mount will be shod. Wayland is said to be either an elf or giant. Perhaps his most famous work is the mail coat of Beowulf. So that's a whole adventure right there, going to get your horse shod, whatever that means. And yeah, so it says he's either an elf or a giant. So when I think giant, I'm thinking a rustic setting where he'd be hiding from people, or an elf he could be maybe underground or somewhere in a city. So that's pretty neat. The White Horse of Uffington, Wiltshire. The gigantic chalk outline was carved from the very hillside of prehistoric times by unknown persons. It is still scoured annually. And then, of course, you have Scotland, and that's where you got the Unseelie Court there. This is the gathering of evil fairies, known collectively as Unseelie Court, is ever a threat to men, whether native Scots or mere travelers. And yeah, and then the different places of interest there in Scotland, where you can have little adventures. And part the third, Ireland. Countries, Kilkenny, of course, Cork, Kerry, Carlow. Yeah. And different points of Kilkee Castle, place of interest. I'll read this one here. Exercise extreme caution when near this place. The Earl of Kildare, a master magician, practiced the art of a secret room within its walls. A spell went over Alry, and now he sleeps in a cavern in County Kildare. It is common knowledge that a group of contemporary masters of the art meet here on a somewhat regular basis. Very good. And then it goes into the glorious British life. Now this is where you start to get more historically based. This is more of the kind of like the tough stuff to read, poverty and all that, and how desperate people were, the poor. And it's a bit of a slog to get through, although it's interesting. But it's good to know, just, to give flavor and to give some tension if you go in the cities especially. And again, it's not. It says not historic. This isn't a historic campaign, or they're not trying to make it historic, but it has trappings. But there's so much covered here, you can't help but to feel weighed down by all the historic detail. Like I said, provided from jobs, crime, how to speak proper. Okay, there's a lot of women and charity and the poor. About 4 pages of that. And then you got pleasures and pastimes, more flavor. So there's a lot more flavor, and then the cost, how much everything costs, and dress and all that. And sure, how you dress is important because it tells you what class you're from, and that's important in this with their theme. Local government, Britain and foreign nations, kind of lost, boring stuff. Police, they go into law enforcement and how brutal they can be. They mostly have those batons, but they can come after you, and they have a little bit more. You don't have as many rights. When the police are on you, they can get pretty nasty. And let's see, this is an interesting one. The policeman's most commonly used phrase is, "Move along there." Their primary function is to keep the streets of important commercial and residential areas free of beggars, loitering, ne'er-do-wells, and the like. They routinely harass members of the ragged classes and have a wide variety of oppressive laws to choose from when justifying their actions. For example, a policeman can at any time search anyone to see if they are carrying game which might have been poached in violation with the archaic game laws. The vagrancy laws also permit police to carry off beggars and other itinerants to workhouses or magistrates' courts. No, there are no workhouses. I'm thinking of that line in Scrooge, which is always a great thing to watch. You can watch Scrooge and get a good feel for this kind of system, this kind of a world, or read the book, or any Charles Dickens books for that matter. Would be good preparation for this. And so it really goes into that. Thieves and footpads, and beggars, fences, how to speak proper. Got your Welsh, your criminal slang, Irish. You got your, like I said, again, how deep do you want to go, into this when you have to get the proper speak, although a little bit of it wouldn't hurt. Let's see. So they have it all kind of spelled out for you a bit. Let's see here. Okay, speaking the Queen's English. Sidewalk is pavement in Britain. Pants or trousers, Knickers, knickerbockers. I got to tell you this. I'm Americano, so I have to kind of tell you what the translation is here. Most of these I've heard of, though. Underpants, knickers. Vest, waistcoat. Undershirt, vest. First floor, ground floor. I thought that was interesting. Second floor is first floor. Cookies and biscuits. That's always I always find that funny. They call them biscuits all the time over there. Instead of vacation, they say I'm going on holiday. Scots. About is about. And old is old. Baby or young child is bairn. It's just a bairn. Close. Conversing is cracking. So yeah, you get the point. You got criminal slang. A slap bang is cheap eating house. It's a slap bang, cheap eating house. Paper money, soft, stiff. You got any soft? Good meal, tightener. That was a tightener. Good meal. So yeah, there's definitely, you can get deep into it if you want. And again, a lot of women, which is it's not too bad. It's only a couple paragraphs. It's still good to keep that in mind, though. The charity and the poor. I mean, you think about all the Charles Dickens books that focus on that and the dynamics of all that going on, But it definitely plays its part. That was a major part of, we're getting in near the industrial age, and it was, that was a big class difference there. So it should be in there in some capacity, playing its part. Even if you're out in the country, it should be there here and there. But it's up to you how you want to play that. Kind of like with the police. Do you want to play them really nasty and abusive, or do you want to play them, a little bit better, not so much like that? That's up to you. But that's kind of the default, is that the police are kind of a little nasty and over the top. Pleasures and pastimes, the different sports and gentlemen clubs. Yeah, I just went over this a little bit, but this at the very end is really eminent Victorians. This is good. So you can even have these characters in there, or characters like them in there. You got Arnold Matthew, poet and critic, and you got Josephine Butler, and Charles Darwin, of course, Charles Dickens. It says Dickens had died in the current game year. His books are still eagerly devoured by literate working-class folk in penny broadsheet part works, and his reputation as a correspondent is very high. Player characters might find some unpublished papers of Dickens and discover some documentation by him. Grace W.G., Florence Nightingale, and the Pre-Raphaelite Brotherhood. It's originally organized as an artistic group which sought to reflect on beauty, but their work has often shocked and offended conventional British art values. Interesting. And the maps are gorgeous. They're huge. They're gorgeous. Like the one in London is unbelievably huge, but that's in black and white, and that seems pretty historically accurate. But the color one of Great Britain is really neat, and I don't really want to rip it out of this book because I like it being in the book like that. But I can just print out the PDFs or whatever. So there you go. For Faerie, Queen and Country, I wanted to go over it one last time before kind of moving on, and I'll come back to it. And like I said, maybe I'll do a proper Victorian setting, maybe in flashback mode for Stanley that he can do, just to give you more of the feel. But like I said, it doesn't have to be in Victorian era. I think as long as it's close enough, I think that helps. And it still kind of works. But yeah, think a bit more nuanced than your Vaesen, although very similar to Vaesen, very similar. And then because in this world everything's more integrated. It's more of a world of where the fairies plays more of a stronger role in probably the politics somehow, by using their other groups to help them out. So at least that's the theme. Again, you can gut the whole thing and use what you like, and leave the rest. But there you go. So that's my review, and that's a going over for Faerie, Queen and Country proper, and pretty good. At a scale of 1 to 10, I give it like a. It's tough because it depends on whether you like that stuff or not. I think if you like it, the fairy stuff and the politics and the English culture and historical fiction, I think it's probably a 9 out of 10. It's really good. It's well done. If you're kind of impartial, or you're like, I'll take it or leave it, and I'd give it a 7.5 out of 10. It's good, but it's not gonna. I guess I have to play it more. If I played it more, it would probably be an 8 or a 9. But I enjoyed it. I enjoyed for I think the second adventure that I did I did the video of. And if I play another adventure, I'll probably fall in love with it a little bit more because I think there's a lot of nuance. So I'd say almost an 8 out of 10 with this one. So, thanks for listening, and let me know what you think. And yeah, keep on solo questing and keep reading.